For international members of the audience, Wisconsin is one of the 50 United States, and the place where I happen to live. I was invited here to share a few perspectives on the Wisconsin Uprising, a genuine popular movement that emerged organically back in February and in which hundreds and hundreds of thousands participated. The response was, the uprising was a response to a host of attacks on the public by the Republicans holding a monopoly on state government, beginning only 2 weeks into the new term of Governor Scott Walker, followed by months of misdeeds and possibly criminal acts. But here, the story is really about how austerity politics may renew a feeling for the social in a US context. Now, it doesn't make sense to consider any single angle of the Wisconsin uprising in isolation, so what follows are just a number of interpretive fragments. The three leading this regressive wave have big national ambitions. This is why we should all be caring about this. They are Congressman Paul Ryan, branded as the brains of his party, Governor Scott Walker, there in the middle, marketed as the executive hammer with national appeal, and Reince Priebus, scary looking guy on the end over there, the new chair of the Republican National Committee. All are from southeast Wisconsin, all are around 40 years old. If not stopped, they will be with us, meaning the world, not just Wisconsin, for a very long time. Okay, so next. Social movements inherit the unresolved affects of earlier political trauma. In Wisconsin, these shadows include the Army math bombing of 1970, which still for some represents the revolutionary chaos of the 60s, and the near permanent internalized fear that is the legacy of Joseph McCarthy, US Senator from Wisconsin. Now, more significant than individual actors or events are the extant institutions. Having outlived their original utility, but still dominating the narrative, the Republican Party and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, both with Wisconsin roots, though not equal in power, do share a kind of zombie status in that they long ago devolved into vehicles of cynical intention and limited imagination. Now, the question is, how do social movements kill off the zombies without getting bit? Next, the Cairo Madison connection was not a case of comparables. Obviously, they are different contexts. The undeniable linkage, however, is based on temporal proximity, a concatenation of space through time. Omar Suleiman announced the departure of Mubarak on Friday, February 11. As celebrations in Tahrir Square went into the night, Scott Walker made an afternoon announcement for his bill that would dismantle the public sector union, threatened to call out the National Guard in the event of labor unrest, and that evening aired third-party TV ads supporting his assault across the state. Unsurprisingly, references to Egypt emerged as one of the early motifs, as the movement spontaneously manufactured ways to understand itself. Days later, the circle of communication was completed when Cairene engineer Mohammed Saladin Nasser posted his now famous picture. Until this image appeared, there was no clear indication that the movements outside of Wisconsin had noticed what was happening there. Its appearance also marked the beginning of the end of the Cairo Madison connection, simply because the comparison could not go that much further in its details. Now, by then, we're talking about the first week, the Wisconsin movement had generated its own storylines and logics, including a couple of dozen recurrent motifs of its own, notable for their idiosyncrasy and the return to radicalism. And here are three quick examples of those. Pop culture references, mainly authored by young people, which brought in a generationally particular layer of communication, and a mechanism of polarization, casting Walker in the role of evil villain, thereby reducing his chances for any sort of later rehabilitation. Palm trees. This motif came out of a Fox News cablecast about violence in the Wisconsin movement. Palm trees in the video images exposed the segment as an untruth built out of stock footage from an event in California. Palm trees became shorthand for corporate media lies. General strike. Because so many different constituencies were attacked and consequently mobilized, the Wisconsin Uprising reintroduced to the American imaginary the idea of labor actions organized across sectors. And in the US, this is a huge deal. Next. Althusser wrote of interpolation as the bedrock mechanism by which capitalism reproduces the conditions for its existence. But in the uprising, the cops said, "Hey, you." You turned around, and he's holding a sign that reads, "Walker, leave our brothers and sisters alone." Now, in such a moment, it is the movement that has reproduced the conditions for its existence. And the point is, if the concreteness of capitalism interpolates, so does the concreteness of a struggle, but only when its concreteness matches that of everyday life. Next. Citizens occupied the Capitol Rotunda for 16 days and nights. The most interesting times were in the wee hours when this marble edifice went into the mode of temporary autonomous zone. The vibe was fringe, and the security was absolutely minimal, and the paranoia constant, but it was also family-friendly in an actual sense. Every night, parents and their small children showed up to make it that way. Partly because of this family element, the occupation really was another world. Okay, so my parting thought is a totally unscientific analysis of where we're at in Wisconsin now when it comes to political affect, which is really the terrain of long-term struggle. Now, I've graphed the Wisconsin uprising against two axes of political affect. The vertical axis is the threshold for outrage, and the horizontal axis is the threshold of resentment. The two thresholds are inversely related in terms of the political horizons to which they lead. When the threshold for outrage is high, that is when people accept the system even if standards of freedom and justice are crashing, and the threshold of resentment is really low, like when the first expression of discontent takes the form of scapegoating those the least bit unlike oneself, we travel along the vertical axis toward the infinity of fascism. Conversely, when the threshold of resentment is high and the threshold for outrage is really low, that is, people get angry when the system does not work, is not fair, possibly an innocent man is executed, for example, and at the same time we view our fellow human beings with sympathy and identify with them rather than resent them, we move toward the infinity of socialism. The curved line represents the arc of political possibility, with most discretes falling on the field inside of it. To sum it up, the uprising has moved aggregate political affect in a left direction. We've lowered the threshold for outrage and raised the threshold of resentment. This is the case on the ground in Wisconsin. How this trend may connect.